This morning, from the first reading, we heard Elijah multiplying bread for the people to eat. And the number that was given to us was 100 people. And in the gospel, Jesus fed over 5,000 people. 5,000 was the number given for men alone, not counting women and children. So he fed over 5,000. What I want to talk about this afternoon, and what I want us to reflect on this afternoon, is the breaking of the bread. The breaking of the bread. Quickly, if you go to Luke chapter 22, verse 19, it says, "Then he took bread, gave thanks to God, broke it, and gave it to his disciples." This was the context where he instituted the Holy Eucharist. Listen to the three things he did. He took the bread, gave thanks to God, broke it, and gave it to his disciples. Just move 2 chapters away from this verse 22 of Luke 22, that's Luke 24, verse 30. He sat down with them, took bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to his disciples. In this context, when he went with 2 of his disciples from Jerusalem to Emmaus, it was when they sat to eat, when he took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, that was when they recognized him. And then we come to the context of what we are talking about today, which is in the Gospel of John, chapter 6. Again, verse 16, he took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them. He took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them. You can see 3 different instances with similar formula as regarding the bread. 3 different instances with similar formula as regarding the bread. The act of giving thanks. The act of giving thanks is an invitation to the giver to do more. The act of giving thanks is an invitation to the giver to do more. It's an invitation to the giver to show more of his or her goodness. If you offer me water and the way I show gratitude to you for offering me cold water in this very hot weather, the way I show that attitude, that gratitude to you, mere water will move you to want to do more. Is that not true? Gratitude is like asking for more. When he gave thanks, he gave thanks to God, right? He was uniting himself with the Trinity in the manifestation of the good in which he did. So the good in this context is feeding the people. The act of giving thanks to God for the food was Jesus, uniting himself with the Trinity in manifesting this goodness he just did. When we give thanks to God for what we have, we do not only show gratitude to God for what we have received from him, we do not only bless what we have, but it is also an act of invitation to God to do more for us. It is also an act asking God to do more for us. So when we want to eat, as maybe breakfast, lunch, or whatever, the simple acts of prayer you do not only bless the food, do not only give thanks to God, but it is an invitation for God to bless you. because gratitude is an invitation to the giver to do more. And that was what he did. Then, let us look at something else. He broke the bread. He broke the bread. The three instances I just listed, in the instance of instituting the Holy Eucharist, in the instance of revealing himself to his disciples who never knew him, and in the instance of feeding the 5,000, he broke the bread. What does that mean? He broke the bread. A bread that could barely feed 10 people fed over 5,000 persons. What really happened? When Jesus broke the bread, he did not just break the physical bread, he broke the very nature of the bread. What do I mean? If this is a book, if I should pack this book into two, it becomes smaller, right? That is how most things are. So the more you break any substance, it becomes smaller. But when Jesus broke the bread, he broke the very nature of the bread to ensure that when you break that bread, it does not become small, yet it still remains the same. He broke the nature of the bread to become like the nature of fire. As small as this fire is, I can distribute it if all of us have candles, and yet the size of this fire will still remain the same. Is that not true? When he broke the bread, he broke the very nature of the bread, the very substance of the bread, to ensure that it doesn't reduce. Another word again I will use for the breaking maybe is changing. When he said he broke the bread, he changed the bread. He changed the substance of the bread. When he broke the bread at the Eucharist, in the Eucharist, he changed the substance. That's what we talk about transubstantiation. The entire substance of the bread was changed from being a bread to the body and blood of Christ, human and divinity. When he broke the bread, at the instance of revealing himself to his disciples, he did not just break the physical bread, he broke the barrier that prevented the disciples from recognizing who he was. That is what he did. Breaking of the bread. When we break our own bread after Thanksgiving also, it brings about something. It could be dynamic. It brings about something. If you look at the first instance, the formula was the same. He gave thanks, broke the bread, and gave it out. That was in the instance of instituting the Holy Eucharist. In the instance of revealing himself to the disciples, he took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it. Same formula. And in this instance of feeding the 5,000, the same formula, yet in all of these contexts, the effects were different. If we break our bread with those who are needy, we do not just break the bread we shared with others, we break the very fabric of that which we lack also, and then we have abundance in that. If your bread is time, learn to break it and share it with those who want your time. In doing that, you are filling vacuums that are left open in your life. Whatever it is, let us learn to share like the way Jesus shared. When we do that, after giving thanks means we do it in union with God. Anything you do without involving God in it. Let's say giving to somebody who is poor, to a beggar, anybody who needs maybe money. If you don't do it in union with God, it is a donation. But when you do it in union with God, it is a spiritual transaction. There is a difference between donation. When you donate, you don't receive anything back. The only thing you receive back is what? Thank you, gratitude. Inviting the person you gave is even inviting you to give more. But when you do it in union with God, it is a transaction. And in every transaction, you are supposed to get something back. Let us learn to break the little bread we have, no matter what it is, no matter how small it is. Yes, it is small. Let us learn to break it, because if we do break that bread, we are breaking the very fabric of that which we want somebody else to give to us. And lastly, why is it about bread? Why can't Jesus break any other thing? Why is it about bread? In fact, he said that he is the bread of life. Why is it about bread? Why did he not use another thing for us in the Eucharist? Why must it be about bread? What is so special about bread? If you have time, look at Genesis chapter 25, verse 30. Bread symbolizes the presence, the eternal presence of God. Bread was used by the Jews in the temple to symbolize the eternal presence of God. So you can understand from where we have this, and then we adore it also. Again, in Numbers chapter 14, verse 9, bread is used to symbolize the act of total victory against the enemy. In Genesis chapter 19, verse 3, bread is used to symbolize the art of hospitality. And then lastly, in Proverbs chapter 9, verse 5, bread symbolizes divine wisdom. If these four things I just listed are the significance, the symbolism attached to bread, how is it related to Jesus? In John chapter 6, verse 48, he said, I am the bread of life who came down from heaven. I am the bread of life. I forgot another thing again. For the Jews, bread symbolizes the staff of life. So when Jesus said he is the bread of life, he was invariably saying he is the staff of life. Staff is a symbol of authority. He was invariably saying he is the staff of life. Again, in John chapter 14, verse 9, he said, to have seen me, Jesus, is to have seen the Father. To have seen me is to have seen the Father. Remember I told you bread symbolizes the eternal presence of God. And Jesus has said that he is the bread of life. And then he's coming again to say that to have seen him is to have seen God. What does that tell you? To have seen the bread, which is Jesus Christ, is to have seen God. So when you read in the Old Testament bread symbolizing the eternal presence of God, Jesus Christ was actually making it practicable here. That is who he is. Again, in Luke chapter 20, verse 43, he said, until I humble your enemies and make them to become your footstool. He is referring to what bread does in Numbers chapter 14, verse 9. I told you bread is the symbol of absolute victory over the enemy. And then in Luke chapter 20, verse 43, he is talking about making the enemy to be defeated and turning the enemy into our footstool. So you should understand why he's talking about bread and why he uses bread. And lastly, remember I told you that in Genesis chapter 19 verse 3, bread symbolizes hospitality. In Matthew chapter 11 verse 28, he said, "Come to me, all you who are labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Hospitality is similar to rest, to give some rest. Come to me, all you who are labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Jesus is the symbol of hospitality. In closing, Proverbs chapter 9 verse 5 symbolizes wisdom. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 24, he says, Christ is the power and wisdom of God. Christ is the power and wisdom of God. So having said all this, I've been able to paint a little picture, maybe not really very well, about why he so identified himself with bread and why he used bread a lot. Just to state again what I want you to take home. Learn to give thanks to God. It should be our attitude. Learn to give thanks to God and learn to share. May the Lord bless us all in our house of Christ our Lord.